FAMU versus Southern is our game of the week. Can the Jaguars run their way into the upset? Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com and make every moment more. When you put a $5 bet down, you'll get $200 back in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com to get started. It's all about FAMU versus Southern. It's all about our game of the week. I think that the stakes are high for both teams. The things that they're looking to be able to accomplish are high for both teams. We're going to wrap up with the key to victory for Southern, the key to victory for FAMU, the two biggest storylines in this matchup. And you already know, if you're an everydayer, how we kick this thing off. But if you're new, welcome. But also, we're going to kick this thing off with three matchups that you need to watch. And the first one that I'm looking at is Kendric Rhymes and Kobe Dillon versus the FAMU Run Defense. And I understand that the Rattlers have had now three game of the week editions on Locked On HBCU, and I brought up their run defense in every single one. I've also taken separate segments to speak about how their run defense is a fatal flaw. And as a Rattler who continues to come back here, you may feel as if I'm beating a dead horse, and I'm okay with you feeling that way. I'm going to continue to beat this dead horse because I think that it's the most important matchup in arguably every game that FAMU plays, every big game that they play. And this is no different. I think that if Southern is going to be able to pull off this upset, running the football will have to be effective. It's not our game of the week, so I can say that. Or excuse me, it's not our key to victory for the Jaguars, so I can say that. But if you're not able to run the football, I don't think that you're able to accomplish the key to victory. If you're not able to run the football, I don't think that you're able to get consistent offense. This is going to be critical for them because FAMU's run defense has been bad. FAMU's run defense has been vulnerable. And to show the degree of play and the difference between how fatal the flaw is between them and Jackson State that they lost to last week, right? I call the FAMU run defense bad. I call the Alabama State quarterback situation bad. When I spoke about the Jackson State secondary, it's like it's a vulnerability. It's still not great. It's still a fatal flaw, but it's not to the degree of this run defense. And I think we saw that last week when Jackson State was able to defend and FAMU wasn't, right? Like that's just how it goes. And I think that if Kendric Rhymes can have the type of game he had last week, which was 133 yards. He had no negative gains or no negative plays, I should say. Then he had Kobe Dillon right there with him, 99 yards. He had one play, one negative yard. And that's the reason he didn't hit the century mark. It would have been the first time that two of the running backs from Southern hit the century mark in the same game, but that just didn't happen. And that's okay. But unless this run game is unless the opponent's run game is absolutely abysmal, I'm going to highlight FAMU's run defense if it is a game of the week. And you know what? If this was 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I might not even have brought this up because I would have put Southern's category or Southern's run game in the category of abysmal, but they had it in the oven. It wasn't in the microwave. It didn't heat up quickly. It didn't pop out fresh off the oven. I didn't see it when the season started piping hot. No, this thing was slow, but you got to put it in the oven. You got to let the heat build up, and it's going to warm up. It's a little bit slower, but sometimes when you put it in the oven, it ends up tasting a little bit fresher than the microwave. You still get to keep them flavors. We'll see if that's what if that's what the Southern run game is. We'll see if that's what the Southern game is. Maybe they're a running game that's starting to develop, right? You had 191 versus Prairie View A&M, 167 against Texas Southern, and then last week they absolutely exploded with 295 yards against Alcorn. Maybe they've been in that oven. Maybe they weren't ready for the microwave. Maybe they needed to heat up slowly and develop into a very strong running attack, mostly on the backs of Kendric Rhymes and Kendall and Kobe Dillon. Maybe that's what needed to happen. So have they discovered the run game? That'll be a big part of whether or not they're able to win this game. Now, I'm going to flip the script. One thing we don't talk about with FAMU is their ability to run the ball. That is not a conversation point when it comes to the Rattlers because they haven't done it well. But I think if they're able to find it this week, if they're able to find a running game, that will benefit them because they're going against an excellent defense. And it's an excellent defense that arguably only lacks in one area, run defense. And they're not bad. They're just middle of the pack. Like when you're first, second in a lot of things, being sixth feels bad. And that's where they are. That's where they are, literally middle of the pack within the SWAC on run defense. They might not be able to pass on them. Who knows? But if they're able to run on them, in general, running the football is such an equalizer. It gives you the ball for longer. It takes the ball out of their hands. It allows you to control the time of possession. It allows you, if you're doing it right, it allows you to get into third and manageables if you're even getting to third downs at all, right? So a 3rd and 6 is a lot different than a 3rd and 2, a 3rd and 3. A 3rd and 9 is a lot more difficult than a 3rd and 1. When you're in between 3 to 1 yards, you can run. You can run. That's what running the football well on early downs allows you to do. FAMU hasn't had that. I mean, Thad Franklin has gotten the most consistent workload. He's hit double-digit carries each of the last 3 games. I would say that Kelvin Dean really hasn't been involved. His yards per carry haven't been too hot as of lately. Then you look at Somerset as a player who, is he ever going to get consistent carries? Because when he hits double-digit carries, he hits 60 yards, right? And he's always been over 5 yards a pop when he hits that 60 yards. But then when he doesn't get double-digit carries, it's as if he's not even in the game plan. He gets 2 carries a game in the games in which he doesn't hit double digits. And that's only so I think he has 5. No, I think he has 6 games. So he got no carries against Jackson State. He has 2 games in which he had double digit, and I think he has 3 games in which he had 2 carries. I think that's what it was. It was either 5 or 6, but I do know that the double digit number I gave is correct, and I know that the 0 that I gave is also correct. So in general, FAMU does not run the ball. Do they run the ball well? No, not particularly, but FAMU also just doesn't run the football. Well, if Southern's worst part of their defense, and I say that very softly, if the worst part of Southern's defense is their ability to stop the run, FAMU need to find the run. You need to find your run. You run less than 30 points, or excuse me, you run the football less than 30 times a game. They're the only SWAC team that can say that. So they're not great at doing it, but they also don't do it a lot. This is the game to ratchet that number up. This is the game to hit 30 or more, 35. Like, you don't do that often. You might want to do that this week. It may help your offense flow a little bit. But you know what? That's probably not what they're going to do because it's not their bread and butter. Instead, they're going to air the ball out with Daniel Richardson. So my last matchup is Ace Cobb and Jamari Gassett versus the Southern defensive backs. And I want to specifically focus on Cobb because I think we all know about who Jamari Gassett is. I'm still looking for him to develop a little bit more consistency on a week-to-week basis, but he's shown the talent in spurts. And quite frankly, they've been able to survive without him having breakout games every week. So, it's kind of up in the air. He had a really good game against Norfolk. Then he had the game against Alabama State. No, I can't remember which game it was, but it might have been Alabama State because it wasn't. I think it was Troy. It definitely wasn't Alabama State, and it wasn't Jackson State. Like it's been kind of hit or miss, but I think he's so talented. You always have to take you have to take him at his peak. But then you look at Ace Cobb over the last 2 weeks, he's gone 3 catches for 49 yards and 2 touchdowns, 3 catches, 92 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's a much different yardage total, but the point is they're getting him more involved. He's not getting 3 catches before this, not frequently, right? And then most importantly, he's upping his touchdown production. So over the last 2 weeks, Ace Cobb has had 6 catches, 4 of them going for a touchdown. That means 2 out of every 3 catches that he's had have been a score. Is that going to continue this week? I don't know, but that is something that I think we need to keep an eye on. That matchup right there, specifically the performance of Ace Cobb as FAMU's emerging number 2. Gassett's still the clear number 1. He has way more production than everybody, but having another option at wide receiver, I think, can make this offense a little bit more deadly. So as we push forward, I want to look at the offense some more. How does FAMU fare against a top-level defense? Because quite frankly, over the last couple of weeks, they really haven't done that well. We'll explore that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. And listen, this is daily fantasy sports made fun. Daily fantasy sports where you can also get a little bit of cash to your name. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. And Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. So if you sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5, you don't even have to win. You don't even have to win to receive this $50 bonus. It's just guaranteed for you. So think Jamar Chase. Is he going to go over? Is he going to have more than 70 yards, or is he going to have less than 70 yards? It's just that simple. You have 2 to 4 players, and you say, are they going to have more or less than whatever that number is? Touchdowns, yardage, basketball is here. So 3-pointers, assists, all of those things are involved. So you go ahead and you go to Prize Picks. You download the app, and you use the code Locked On College to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Go to the app, Prize Picks, and use the code Locked On College. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. And for your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On. Check out Locked On Packers, man. I think that the Packers are doing really well this year. So go ahead and check out Locked On Packers. Oh my God, Justin Jefferson just made a ridiculous catch. Check out Locked On Vikings with Luke Braun too. Jesus Christ. Anyway, let's look at these matchups. That guy is ridiculous. Did he catch that? Bobble. Good God. He caught that. Anyway, check out Locked On Vikings. I'm sure Luca has something to say about that. Anyway, my matchups. We've already looked at those. You have Ace Cobb, Jamari Gassett versus the Southern defensive backs. And then you have each team's running backs versus the opponent's front 7 and run defense. But now let's get into our storylines to watch. And the number one storyline that I'm looking forward to is, how does FAMU fare against a top flight defense? I've seen that over the last 2 weeks. They can't catch a break. FAMU can't catch a break. They go from Alabama State to Jackson State to Southern. And right, I know that the first 2, they probably ring a bell a little bit louder, but Southern's defense has been on fire this year. Let's talk about it for a second. 2nd in yards allowed, 3rd in points allowed, 1st in pass defense. I told you the one place that you're going to want to attack them is the running game, because they're 6th in run defense. The problem is FAMU doesn't want, or are they particularly great at running the football? They need to lean into that, but I'll leave that in segment 1. FAMU can't catch a break with these dominant defenses, and I have not been overly impressed with the way that they've performed against these defenses. I wasn't in love with how they looked against Alabama State. I thought that they looked pedestrian against Jackson State. I went back and did a little bit of looking. The Alabama State game was better than I thought, but I didn't think it was great. I definitely wouldn't say that they won the matchup. I would say in the 2 battles between top level defenses, Alabama State lost both of those battles. FAMU lost both of those battles to Alabama State and also to Jackson State. So to me, this is not a team that rises to the occasion in that capacity, which is what makes it so interesting, which makes it so confusing. Here's the funny part is, sometimes I feel like I'm still treating FAMU as if they're Willie Simmons's FAMU offenses. And that's unfair to them, because as you go through the season, they may just not be this high-powered offense. So when I'm talking about how are you going to fare against high-level defenses, you're not supposed to fare that well. You're supposed to get some plays. I think that FAMU is a good offense, and I always try to say I think they're a really good offense. But are they ready to be toe to toe with the best defenses in the conference? I don't know. That's something that I'm looking at. That's something that I'm looking at because they haven't been. They haven't been for Alabama State. They haven't been for Jackson State. And you're looking at a Southern defense that is sixth in the nation in pass defense, and you like to pass the football. I'm telling you, FAMU, the team that rarely runs over 30 times in a game, you want to lean into that. Whether it's Somerset, whether it's Dean, whether it's Franklin, you got to give touches to your running back. You can even do it with Daniel Richardson. You can even get him involved in the game, but you got to run the football. That's just the way that I look at it. I liked his running back runs or his quarterback runs against Norfolk State in the first game. So yeah, passing yards allowed is the number that really gets me because Southern allows the least amount of passing yards in the conference. You've seen that against Jackson State where they didn't run for a lot, and they also were kind of hampered in the passing game as well. That was one of their better performances because you look at Jackson State, typically if they don't pass the ball for a lot of numbers, they're going to run it down your throat. That's what happened against FAMU, right? Like FAMU, I think allowed 150 yards through the air. It wasn't great. Kendall Bowler, man, that interception was great though. But for the most part, it's not as if they were airing them out, but they ran the ball down your throat for I think like 290. When you're running for near 300 yards, you don't need to pass for that much. That's the difference. Then the second storyline I want to look at is what if Southern wins, right? What if Southern wins? What if Southern is able to pull off this upset? Obviously, that would do a lot of damage to FAMU because now you're looking at FAMU as not being a SWAC East contender. I'm ready to wrap that up if that's the case. No playoffs. This is basically get ready for 2025, see how you're able to perform, right? And that wouldn't be crazy, but I don't want to get into that right now. If they lose, we'll get into that. But if they don't, it's just kind of unnecessary in my opinion. But what if Southern wins? If Southern wins easily the most difficult game on their schedule remaining, if Southern's able to win this game, they take a huge step forward in being the winners of the SWAC West. Like, it's not even close. This would be the biggest win of the weekend. The rest of the schedule goes Alabama A&M, Bethune-Cookman, UAPB, Grambling. I'm not saying those are cupcake games, and I think that they could lose one. I don't know if they lose two. They could, right? Like, I think we'll know a lot about Alabama A&M this weekend after they face Alabama State. We'll know a lot about how we feel and how we should operate and think about the Bulldogs. Bethune-Cookman, if you beat FAMU, you should beat Bethune-Cookman. UAPB, it's gonna be a gritty game. Grambling, the Bayou Classic, nah, can't say nothing. But here's my thing. Alcorn, their biggest competitor in the division as far as wins and losses, you're looking at Bama State. They have a bye week this week, right? Alcorn has a bye. Then you got to go Bama State, Texas Southern, PV, Jackson State. Let's just say they're going to lose the Jackson State game. And to be clear, if Southern wins this game, it is an upset. I don't know. I don't feel confident about any of those games. Maybe Texas Southern, maybe PV, but I really think it just depends on how they play that game. If they play that day well, then they could beat them. If they don't, they'll get beat. That's the interesting thing about PV. That's the interesting thing about Texas Southern. But matter of fact, let's get into our keys to victory because I think FAMU has a surprising one and Southern has an even more surprising key to victory that we'll get into as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the NBA is here, right? And I think my boy Zion, he should be back in the next game. He missed the first game with an illness. DeJounte Murray, that one hurt. But go on some individuals. You think Zion going to go more than what they think his numbers are, his point total is going to be? Do you think that Jose Alvarez will get a couple of steals if you're familiar with GTA? Maybe you want to go on to Bron out in LA. Maybe even Bronny if you're feeling risque, right? That doesn't matter. You go ahead and go into the NBA setting, you go into the NFL setting, the MLB, all of that and some. You just got to go to FanDuel.com. And if you're new to FanDuel and you put down a $5 bet, you get $200 back in bonus bets. So you pick your choice. LA, Milwaukee, New Orleans, All those schools, all those cities except for Milwaukee have football teams, and let's just change that to Green Bay. You go ahead and put your money down. You go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more and get a free $200 back in bonus bets if you put down a $5 bet. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. The keys to victory may surprise you. FAMU needs to run the football. That is my key to victory for FAMU. And I understand that they could win without it, but I think that that would really secure a victory. That is what would lock it down if you're able to run the football well. I think there's so much intrigue in this matchup. The intrigue stems from the fact that if there's one thing that Southern doesn't do well on or doesn't do great on defense, it's stop the run. If it's one thing FAMU ain't trying to do, it's run the football. Now, that would set up for a battle between the two strengths of the team, which is pass offense versus pass defense. But if I'm FAMU, I'm coming in to twist it. I'm coming in to kind of change what you thought you were going to get. I'm running the football. I know that you struggle there. I'm going to commit. I'm going to give Thad Franklin carries. I'm going to give Kelvin Dean carries. I'm going to give Somerset carries. Like, I'm not sitting here letting you not have to defend the run. I'm not doing that, right? Like to me, that's counterintuitive, and that's letting them off the hook. You got to at least show it. And you know what? It's not like everybody runs against Southern. I don't want to make it seem like Southern just has a piss poor run defense. They don't. They have 6th in the conference. We're talking about a team that's used to being 1, 2, 3. We're talking about people who are used to being on the medal stand, and then all of a sudden they say, "Oh yeah, you got to be middle of the pack." If it's not one thing they do great, if it's one thing they don't do great, it's stop the run. But you look at PV. PV couldn't run to save their life. PV could not run to save their life against Southern. And I'm talking about Prairie View A&M was up. They had the opportunity to run, and they did it 54 times. They ended the game with 109 yards. PV ended the game with 109 yards on 54 rush attempts. That's the second lowest that Southern's allowed all year. And the only game in which someone ran for less is when they ran 21 times, and that was 50 yards. So they ran significantly less. But PV, they ran 54 times. So it's not like anybody and everybody can run against Southern. But I've seen enough people do it to where I know it's doable. You have to get it done. Kelvin Dean didn't stop being talented. I think that they have talented running backs. Talent don't get it done all the time, but I think they have talented running backs, guys who could take advantage of a semi-weak run defense by the Southern Jaguars. So for the Rattlers, I know running isn't what they do, but I'd like them to discover it this week. I think that'd be very beneficial to securing and locking down a victory. Now, Southern, keep it close. That's all I'm asking. If Southern can just keep this game close, they can win. Matter of fact, take it to the 4th quarter. Something that Jay Walker continued to say about FAMU all game last week is that, well, FAMU, if you get into the 4th quarter, no one's been able to close them out. No one's been able to beat FAMU in the 4th quarter. Of course, that happened last week, but that doesn't take away from the fact that typically FAMU is a really good closing team. One game in which they didn't close was Jackson State. Here's the thing about Southern. Southern is also a really strong closing team. Now, you look at the 3 games in which they came out victorious, they knew how to close those matchups. So you look at this Prairie View A&M game, the first SWAC victory of their season. They were down. They had to come back. They had to come back in that game and push it into overtime, and they had to come back and win in OT. That was a come-from-behind victory that they were able to secure in the 4th quarter. Then you're looking at the Texas Southern game, which was the next one. Matter of fact, I think in the Jackson State game, they had a good 4th quarter as well, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see if that is the case. Nah, they just kind of heated up late. They went 3-6-6. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that was great in either quarter, but they lost that game, right? But you're looking at Texas Southern. This one's kind of painful for me to talk about, but against Texas Southern, they went into that game and they were down in the 4th quarter. They blocked the punt late. I'm talking about clutch to get a short field. And then from that short field, that's when they took one play. It was only 18 yards, or how long was it? I know it was a pass to Quay Davis, which sucked because Quay Davis had just left Texas Southern. But a 16-yard, there we go. It's 18 seconds on the clock. So like it was a one play drive. You knew you had to have a touchdown. You got it on the first play. Then you take that game in the OT and you beat them. Absolutely squashed Texas Southern defensively. All you needed was a field goal, and you got that on your side of the ball in OT. Then you look at Alcorn, it was 14-14 at the end of the first half. Southern wasn't really putting together much. They went scoreless in the first, scoreless in the third. They put points on the board in the second, 14 of them. It was 14-14 at halftime. Nobody scored in the second half until the end of the game when Southern put 10 points on the board in the fourth quarter. Basically, what I'm saying is if Southern can get this game to the fourth quarter, they've shown the ability to close out too. We'll see if they're able to do it here. This will be a massive upset. This will be a massive upset for the Southern Jaguars. And if they're able to complete this and pull this off, it would send ramifications through not only the SWAC West, but then also the SWAC East. So the entire conference. And you would have to be putting Southern in conversations of top 4, top 3 teams in Black college football. I can't wait to watch this game. This is going to be so much fun. It's Saturday evening. So make sure that you guys are tuning into that. I think it's on ESPN Plus. But we'll be back on Monday to break down the biggest storylines of the weekend, and this for sure will be one of them. So, in the meantime, in between time, until the next time we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed, peace.